I raised my kids unemployable, and I intentionally did that.
He's starting a rocket company. He's 17.
How do you balance work and family after a 9-figure exit?
I had to figure out, how do I not fail my kids while not failing my business? And what happened is that
Anastasia Koroleva is a 4-time exited founder and hosts the Exit Paradox podcast. As such, she's interviewed over 800 founders.
What are the most common mistakes that people make after they sell their company?
number one,
But how do you build meaningful success while also building a family?
you have to take risks all the time. For me as a woman, the biggest challenge is, how do you have babies and be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're out of the game as an operator for 4 or 5 years, your advice, it degrades very rapidly.
Focusing on a child's motivation is the most important thing. They will actually find happy moments in their lives better than you can.
That is so interesting.
Now 2 of her children are building companies of their own in their teens. So she has an understanding of how to nurture success.
By the age of 15, he was financially independent.
Today I sit down with Anastasia to talk about what really changes after a big exit and how she keeps everything in check.
What's the single piece of advice you hear again and again from exited founders, but rarely see implemented?
Well,
You went from being an M&A lawyer into building and successfully selling for startups. Were there any transferable skills from being a lawyer to being an entrepreneur, or did you have to completely reprogram your brain?
both. It took me a few years to actually lose some of the most quintessential, most important skills I had learned as a lawyer. And one of them is actually focusing on what can go wrong. But if you think about it, once you lose that fanatical desire to find problems in every project, but you still have a little bit of it, that becomes a competitive advantage as an entrepreneur. Because most entrepreneurs are ignoring every single risk out there. So I think that it was difficult, and it took a long time to start accepting risks again as an entrepreneur after having practiced law for a few years. But at the same time, having this ability and training, more than ability maybe, to also focus on the details and try to imagine how things can go wrong in the future can be very useful.
Are there any specific examples where you had to take some risk?
Well, you have to take risks all the time as an entrepreneur, right? And I found that in the beginning, I was very almost like afraid to take any risk, because I just saw so many things that could go wrong. I'm sure I missed a lot of opportunities. Hard to think about a specific example right away. But I guess, for example, I think I was way too careful in hiring people for a long time. That's a good one. Because also when you're a lawyer, you get used to thinking within one industry and one craft. And with lawyers, when you hire other lawyers, it's much more predictable how well they would do than, for example, when you hire somebody for a business, right? Where their personality matters so much more than how many deals they've done before, how many clients they brought somewhere before. So I think I was way too conservative for a while. And I actually remember very well what changed everything completely. I was actually not forced, but encouraged by a partner in the business to hire someone, an engineer, who, to me, didn't have any qualifications to do what he was supposed to be doing. But that person, in one weekend, rewrote the whole system we had in that business into something that was much simpler, much more efficient. And I was so impressed that after that, I remember that moment when I decided, okay, I need to start thinking about people very differently than I was used to.
Certifications and qualifications are like one example of people having some level of ability or extraordinary ability. But there's so many other ways for people to demonstrate that, right, from their past, which are not necessarily obvious.
Also now I think much more about what ability is transferable. what ability is your natural calling, your natural ability. So if I interview someone today, my questions are completely different than when I just stopped being a lawyer, when I focused on very different things. Now I really want to understand you better than you understand yourself in a way, by thinking, okay, if I'm hiring that person for something that he was born to do or she was born to do, I know they'll be amazing. But chances are they themselves don't know what they were born to do. So I need to understand that. Because in the business, especially early on, it's so important that all the key people are doing what they were born to do, and that they will be pulled to do these things, ideally.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's such an interesting concept. When you think about talent, right, I think one of the most probably the highest leverage skill anyone can have in life is being able to attract and then select talent, whether you're a founder, whether you're a football manager, whether you're a VC or an investor, right? It's how do you attract the very best talent, and then how do you select who they are? Do you have a particular model for doing that?
So I do, and I think it's very personal to me because I tend to overcomplicate things. And once I understood that about myself, I started trying to be very disciplined and focusing on just 1-2 things, because otherwise I tend to go too broad, too complicated. So for me, those things were what just I mentioned to you before, which is trying to figure out who that person actually is and what they are meant to be doing, what is deeply driving them, by asking them questions that are not direct. Because in this strategy of hiring, the most important thing for me to discover was that people will sell themselves, and they may A, be selling themselves because they want a job, and B, because they honestly have no idea who they are. And if you are an experienced entrepreneur and you've seen people fail because they were doing the wrong jobs, not aligned with who they are, then it doesn't work for anyone. So that's really my main thing. Once I figure out who they are and I actually like the person, I may even change my mind about what they would be doing in a company. But you probably have something similar, don't you, in your approach? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I want to hire people kind of aligned with what you're saying, who really want it, right? And in some ways, some people would describe my hiring process as being overcomplicated and extensive and having too many hurdles. But that is one way to filter out who really wants this and who feels like this is their path.
You make it difficult for them to...
Correct. Yeah. And look, you may say that, okay, maybe some of the very best experienced talent in the world may be put off by that process, right? Because they feel like they shouldn't have to go through it. But for me, I think your job as a founder isn't hiring the most experienced people from the best brands in the world. It's about finding undiscovered talent and developing them. I'm not going to compete with OpenAI for their senior talent. So I think as soon as you kind of realize that, and you realize there's lots of other great people out there who are potentially future CTOs of OpenAI, maybe in 15 years or 20 years time, that are yet to be discovered. I focus my time on trying to find those people and develop them, rather than trying to go out and go to war with, the big seven.
Knowing you don't just train them, but you really take care of them. Because
of course,
you're my role model in how to treat people.
Yeah, well, look, so look, I mean, we have a few things that we do to try and develop our team members and also, make sure that they're happy and productive in more than just their work, productive in terms of producing more kids is one of the key things we do. So we have quite a generous parental policy, and we try and encourage, we literally have a mission statement of parental policy, which is, we believe we are very good at finding the best talent, and therefore we believe we have an obligation to the world to help them reproduce and create more talented people in the world.
But this is hugely important, because for me as a woman, the biggest challenge is how do you actually can have babies and be an entrepreneur? And I think this problem hasn't been solved in this world, and we're all struggling.
But you are one of the people who has done both, right? You've built...
Yeah, but it hasn't been easy. But
you've been highly successful at it. So you've had...
Thank you for saying that.
4 amazing, companies that you've built. And you have how many kids now? 4?
I had three boys.
3 boys now, who are all extraordinary and are extraordinarily successful themselves.
Well, as a mother, I certainly think so.
I can tell you they are. Working on space technology and various other things whilst they're still teenagers, is incredibly impressive. So how have you done that? Because like many people have sold this, I guess, I think it's a little bit of a lie, but there's a dichotomy, right? You can either choose, you can be a great mum or you can have a great career. You can't do both, right? But you've done both very well to the top 1% in both. How have you done that?
First of all, thank you, because you're much nicer to me than I am to myself. I always feel I'm not doing it well enough. And I'm dealing with a lot of guilt, even though I'm much better than I used to be. But I'm a big believer in creating constraints, even if they don't exist. So first of all, they may just exist, and then I welcome them. Or if they don't exist, I create them for myself and my kids. Why? Because when we have constraints, we find the most efficient ways to do things. So when I had to run my companies and I had 2 little kids at home and I had just had a divorce, so I was alone with them. There were lots of constraints all at the same time. So I had to figure out, how do I not fail my kids while not failing my businesses? And what happened is that I think I found a way to not focus on how much time I spend with the kids as much, because I figured that it's absolutely impossible with the chaotic life of a founder to keep boundaries intact. Maybe some people are better than me. For me, it didn't work very well. So instead of focusing on the time, I focused on 2 other things. One is energy, and we can master energy for the rest of our lives, but as well as I could. So I refocused from time and gave myself permission not to try to discipline myself around some, boundaries with time of the day, but try to create energy for both my business and my kids. So I had to do a bit of learning on how our brain works and how we have very different types of energy that comes, for example, for our dopamine when we're chasing something, and then a very different kind of energy that comes from oxytocin when we are with our family and with our kids. And when I realized that, if I understand the energy a little bit better, I can have energy for everyone. And the second thing was, I started thinking about how I can have the most impact on my children that is very meaningful, instead of just spending time with them. Because sometimes I would carve out a lot of time in the day for them, but I wasn't really, if I were honest with myself, I wasn't either fully present because the energy wasn't there, or I wasn't impactful enough because I didn't have clarity on what it is I wanted to do for them in this particular moment in time in my life. So I spent a bit of time on mastering energy and then on having a clear strategy and idea of what it is I'm going to do for my kids, and learning at the same time. And what I learned, for example, is that focusing on a child's motivation is the most important thing. Because if they're motivated, they will actually find what to learn, how to develop, how to find happy moments in their lives better than you can.
So digging deeper into that, how do you create that motivation? What are the secrets to really getting your kids motivated?
Here's what I discovered for myself, and it works for me, is if I don't have that much time, right, and I need to be very efficient in how I consistently create motivation for my kids, then I need simple rules that are also actually executable. So what helped me is paying a lot of attention to where my children are naturally better than other children. And why it's so important, not so I can show off to other parents and tell them how amazing my kids are, but because I believe that Mother Nature created us with a certain set of hardwired skills, so we can then use them to contribute something to the tribe, to the human tribe. And maybe when human societies were much simpler, that would be very easy. Somebody would clearly be a hunter. Somebody would clearly be something else. But now our societies are very difficult, So our job for all of us is to figure out how all these different little talents can be brought together to contribute something to the world that would be so valuable that also that world will give us what we need from it. So we have a very harmonious relationship. Why it's relevant to motivation is because if you agree that this makes sense as a fundamental truth, then people would naturally be motivated to do things that they're meant to do. And we see it in children a lot. A child would want to sit there and draw for hours, and the parents would be super annoyed because they would want the child to do homework or to do something else. So I trained myself to register whatever my child wants to do voluntarily without me forcing the child to do it. And then I would flip the situation and I would use that thing they love to do as the reward. So let me give you an example. One of my oldest child showed early interest in anything medical or related to biology or chemistry. And as an adult, I could see that clearly his interests are in that area, something medical or biochemical. And of course, I loved it that he had that interest. But what I did is I used that as a reward for things he didn't want to do. So he didn't want to do his homework. And there was a point when he was 12 and he needed to prepare for very difficult exams for a very long time. I told him, okay, listen, if you do all this work, I will allow you to watch 20 minutes of Stanford University's program on microbiology, which he really liked. And because for him, it was something that he really loved doing, he didn't question that it made zero sense. Instead, because he loved doing it, he was willing to do a lot of work to then do something that actually I wanted him to do a lot of, but I would only allow him 20 minutes of it because then it would become really precious, something he wanted to do even more. So what happened is that I kept creating more motivation in something I knew was his calling. But in the meantime, I would make sure he does something he didn't want to do. And I did it in many different areas with every single thing I found that that child really wanted to do. And I would flip it into the whole reward system. So what happened is that my kids never got obsessed about video games because instead they always had something else they loved so much and wanted to do and had no idea that their mother was having this whole system. Well, if they watch this, they'll finally find out all my secrets. But the beauty was that we all want to get this dopamine from something that we like doing. And it can be cheap dopamine in the form of video games, which many parents do. They say, if you do your homework, I'll let you play video games. But it can also be in some form that is actually good for the child and feels even better because it's a different kind of satisfaction. It's not this cheap dopamine that gives you a high and then a low. It's a much more sustainable energy that they get out of it. So my idea was that if I train them to love that kind of sustainable energy instead of looking for quick fixes, then it's better for them and it's better for me. And then when I did it over time, that was just an experiment and it could have failed, but it didn't. So I now use it for my younger kid as well. Use what they love doing as a reward and an incentive system to make them do things that they have to do.
Amazing. The secret's out. All right. The reason I'm obsessed with asking Anastasia questions about our kids is because they have done remarkable things already. Talk me through what each of your kids is currently doing.
All right. So that particular child I just used as an example, he did end up obsessing about things that are biochemical. And I know nothing about that industry, but I very much respect his interest. And I think it's wonderful because what he's doing right now are basically two things. One is he's building a device that allows people to see changes in their inflammation levels based on sweat. This is an early startup, But what's interesting is how he decided to fund that startup, because he had several successful entrepreneurial ventures before. He got a little bit of money, and now he invests that money, and then he makes bets on the market based on his own analysis. And he's so amazing at this that in the last half a year since he started doing this strategy, he got, I told you, 230% return on that investment strategy, but based just on him applying his knowledge and his interest in analyzing clinical trials and then finding the most amazing value on the market to bets based on his knowledge. And when he just started his kind of entrepreneurial career when he was 13, and by the age of 15, he was financially independent. In the beginning, it was very much about financial freedom, as for most of us. But it only took him about 3 years to discover that actually financial freedom by itself doesn't give him the kind of satisfaction he wants. And now it's very much about like, oh, my device will help people with autoimmune conditions, with all these different other problems. It will actually change people's lives. And now he has this sense of urgency that I need to work very hard because I'm already 19, so I need to create this thing as soon as possible. And I love seeing this just because it's not about just seeing your child happy, like joyful happy, but it's seeing your child being so very well aligned with his calling and very clear idea of where he wants to go. It's so beautiful to watch, and nothing can distract him. And I think nothing can distract him because the whole cheap dopamine problem, which affects all of us, frankly, but especially young people, is completely irrelevant for him because he has a source of deeper pleasure.
It's purpose, yeah.
It's purpose.
And so that's, going back to your dopamine thing, as you're saying, all the highs come with equal lows, right? And it's the same when people, I think, search for happiness, and optimizing for happiness. I mean, what does that mean? Happiness is relative to unhappiness, right? And so I think seeking purpose and fulfillment leads to a much more balanced and sustainable level of motivation and energy than seeking happiness, right?
But the problem is that we self-sabotage, right? Because every time we allow ourselves to enjoy this cheap dopamine, we're training the system to seek more of that because it's much easier way to get happy for a little bit, right? And when I interviewed you for my podcast, you were sharing a very similar vision for this, right? Because I think what's common for you and me, that once we ourselves discovered the difference and how it feels in terms of the satisfaction for being on a mission, you don't really want to go back to just chasing little quick pleasures because they no longer feel satisfying or even attractive.
So he's using the zero-sum game of trading to fund the positive-sum game of building a company.
Yeah, he has a very good level of self-knowledge, so he knows that he needs to control that product that he's dreaming about, and he wants to control the process, and he understands the danger of a conflict of interest between investors and an entrepreneur. Like my other son is building a rocket company. He will absolutely need investors, right? Because it's a different type of business. So for him, investors are his best friends. But this child is hoping to never raise any money for his project, but instead earn it through his amazing ability to invest and grow his wealth. So then later he can risk it all for something he believes in and something that he feels is his impact on the world.
Amazing. And now on to your second child. And you just, casually mentioned that he's starting a rocket company.
He's
17?
He's 17. The rocket company is about 1 year old. They have 30 employees who all work for free. And I keep asking him, can you teach me how you do that? Not only they work for free.
Child labor.
But they're not children. That's the thing. They're adults. It's an adult labor.
Volunteers.
And his natural talent, one of the many, is to inspire people. and he has the confidence and conviction and the social instincts to do that, and that's his strength. And he's so inspiring for kids and adults that people want to work with him even if there's no payment involved. And they've secured a very incredible relationship with the Imperial College, which supports them with fuel, giving them access to the labs, helping them, the best professors in the college help them think through issues. And that's mostly because he was able to ignite this inspiration in these people as well. He is a real artist and creator. For him, it's all about the products. And because of that, he's happy to go and raise money because he is not necessarily as much of a control freak as his brother. He literally doesn't care that much about what his economic upside will be in this business. He just wants to see that rocket go. And that's beautiful in a different way, right? And as a parent, I love both approaches because I can see how both are aligned with who they are. And the earlier we understand who we are, the better it is for everyone, including the world, that can benefit from who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Amazing. And the 7-year-old that I asked, what's he doing?
No rockets yet.
So you have also spoken to or interviewed, I think, close to 1,000 founders who've been through an exit. And you probably have you're probably one of the most wise people or knowledgeable people on the mistakes that people make post an exit, perhaps how people find their purpose after having an exit. What are the most common mistakes that people make after they sell their company?
Number one is in this state when we are suddenly very confused about everything. It's only natural for us to want to go to some sense of comfort. And we just want to escape this highly uncomfortable state. So it's only natural that most of us think, oh, where did I have that certainty before? That was running a startup. So they jump into starting something else way too early, before they rested, before they had a chance to process their previous experience. And oftentimes, sadly, and I know you've seen lots of these cases as well, oftentimes, sadly, people then actually waste years doing their own thing because it's often very hard to leave. And if it's self-funded venture, then people tend to keep throwing good money after bad, even after they decided for sure that it was a bad idea. Because you need to save face. You can't admit that you failed. You feel that everybody expects you to succeed much more than before, which often, by the way, is not even the case because people don't care. But most of us have that idea that everyone expects us to succeed much, much more. So people get stuck in their own venture, throwing good money after bad. And then, of course, once you've invested your money, you really wanted to succeed. And then years later, you're so burnt out. You're actually in a much worse place after that second exit or failure, whatever it ends to be, than you were before. That's the most common mistake. But if people don't use their own money and they raise money, then they have another pressure from the investors to deliver. And what I noticed is there's a very common pattern for people who had a very successful first exit and they actually have financial freedom. Not everybody has after an exit, but those who do, they have the risk that about 2 years after that exit, if they already started another business, they actually run out of motivation. And they start thinking, why am I here? Like, I can afford the most beautiful life. And then, my family is not seeing me. Why am I here? So they close that business. So that's for me is the most common mistake. Also, the scenario where we use our own money and keep throwing good money after bad, I found to be the number one way how people lose the most exit wealth. It's not investing, actually. It's that. The second most common thing is because we lose our identity, we try to recreate it really quickly because the pain of not having identity is very painful. So we start angel investing, the most common thing, or we start creating some kind of descriptions on LinkedIn of a stealth startup we're not actually running. Whatever it is, we're trying to tell the world that we are still relevant. And that is not very helpful for us, because we do need to go through the process of just accepting the fact that the life has changed and that old identity is no longer ours, and that's just fine. It has given us a lot. That processing is unfamiliar and difficult for lots of us, so we avoid it. If you look at the statistics of what happens post-exit, in the first 2 years, the likelihood of people starting a new business is very high. Then from year 2 to 3, it starts going down. But after year 3, it drops. And the reason it happens is because within those 3 years, we adapt to the new reality and we get very used to this very comfortable life. And then we don't start another business, and it becomes extremely hard. And that's a very common mistake, because in year 5, which I found to be the hardest actually in the whole journey, this is where we hit the bottom. People look back and they say, really? 5 years? And I haven't done anything? And it hits people really hard. So for me, it's a 10-year period of adaptation after an exit, where year 5 or 6 are the hardest. And then we're going to climb out.
When the world is moving very quickly, and particularly when technology changes very quickly, a lot of the advice, even on how to operate and build companies, changes very quickly, right? And I see frequently, there's a lot of VCs who talk about being ex-operators, right? And actually, I think, if you're out of the game as an operator for 4 or 5 years, your advice is it degrades very rapidly in terms of its usefulness, right? At least, particularly within technology, I'd say. Right?
Yeah.
And, when someone has built and successfully sold a business, obviously they need to do what's best for them. But I do try to convince people to start another business. And, there is a lot of capital out there. There's a lot of people who want to put money into companies, particularly into companies started by people who have previous success. There is not enough people who want to, or who are talented enough and want to start businesses, right? And so I try and encourage them to start another company. And typically, look, some people go into investing full time. Some people want to spend some time with their family. But in the conversation I had, I found that people who've have found the most purpose have started another company.
Alex, I will agree with you to some extent. And also, I love your hack into that whole thing, that you made sure you started your next business before you exited the first one. And in our interview on my podcast, you actually said that you planned it that way because you were scared of being in this limbo that all your other friends were post-exit. And I use your example very often when I talk to people who are only considering an exit. And I tell them honestly that, look, you should keep that in mind, that there is this way to think about it also. But the reason I don't think it's necessarily good for everyone is because people are often really burnt out. And I think that if they take a break, not only to recover, but also to fully understand how to run another business with a mission and purpose, but without a burnout, which is totally possible, then they are much more likely to succeed in the next one and actually not feel the pressure to sell it. Because what you don't want them to do is to what I did at some point, because I think I've made every possible mistake, which is have this idea, oh, now I understand how the full cycle works. How about I have a shorter cycle next time?
Yeah, look, it's like the typical tell, if I see a deck from a founder and it's got an exit slide in it, it's like an automatic no for me.
But they think they align in with you as an investor. So that's also very interesting, because then you want to know whether they are just trying to align with you, or they simply don't understand the importance of this transformation from a mercenary to a missionary founder.
But for me, if it's the first thing and it's them trying to align with me, then it just shows they haven't done enough research, either on me or just generally on venture
capital. And they lack confidence.
Yeah, they lack confidence as well. Yeah.
And maybe conviction. And then you have to question, okay, do I actually want to invest in someone who's lacking conviction in the thing that where I will risk my money?
Exactly, precisely.
So this is basically to say you're right, rejecting them. But it's interesting that there may be different motivations for doing that.
What's the single piece of advice you hear again and again from exited founders but rarely see implemented?
It's interesting that not probably, but it is take a time off, for sure. You agree? People do tell each other
People told me to do
off.
that. Yeah, people told me, and I did ignore it. Yeah,
You did ignore it. But you see, it's great that you ignored it because you are very missionary and you understand the purpose and everything. But imagine if you ignored it, but you just wanted another quick cycle. Then that would be a problem because you would have that financial freedom. And you would actually end up in the situation I discussed before, trapped, and then you would give up. So you had that confidence that you are doing the next business for a non-financial reason. That's why you could do it right away.
very true. Yeah, that's a good insight. What's the most common investment that exited founders buy or invest in after their exit that everyone speaks really positively about?
Can I have more than one?
I'm sure.
Well, I think angel investing happens a lot, but also people look for cash flow businesses.
Yeah. And do you think it's a mistake to go into either of those two areas?
No, not necessarily. I think it depends. But it depends on the person's clarity about who they are and what they should and should not be doing, and whether, again, it's aligned with their skill set and personality. So for somebody who is an experienced investor with deep knowledge in the particular field, or maybe insider knowledge, an angel investing may work. If people do what I did after my first exit, which is just getting excited about ideas and giving lots of small checks to everyone, that doesn't, in my experience, work very well. But there's something else which I found even more important. Not only people often lose money, but we often lose time, and we take ourselves through very unnecessary emotional roller coaster. Because I think with angel investing, what happens a lot is that we also want to mentor, but our mentoring may not be helpful for the founder. It's often rejected. I'm sure you had those moments. I had those moments when my ego was really hurt, but they have the right to reject it. So that is one thing. But another thing is our expectation is that we will get back into the excitement of a startup. But for most people, it doesn't work, because if we don't actually control a startup, and especially if we're a creative person, what we crave is creating something out of nothing. But just by being passive or semi-passive, we don't have this satisfaction. So again, we're disappointed. And I think the last thing we need post-exit is even more emotional volatility.
Yep, very true.
And with cash flow businesses, again, it depends on who you are. If you are a creative person who should be creating beautiful products, then investing in laundromats will not give you the satisfaction you're looking for.
I started looking at this as well right after the accident. I was like, oh, but I was already doing SQL, but I was like, I should buy some cash flowing businesses, right? I'll hire someone to manage them. It won't take up any time. Right? Everyone thinks that. They're like, oh yeah, I'll just hire someone to. The reality is, if you're going to do it properly, you need to invest a lot of time in learning about it.
Yes. And you need to have the right personality. So I have friends who are amazing at this thing. But I understand why they're amazing, because they're that kind of personality. And I know, thank God, it's not me.
I will get bored.
Again, I think understanding how we naturally win is very important. And if you naturally don't win through investing into simple products and cash flow businesses, maybe it's not your way, and that's fine. Leave it for other people.
What does success mean for you?
At this stage in my life, for me, the success is making progress in my mission, and this clarity that I am making impact. Everything else is kind of secondary. It's very much impact and progress towards it.
What is a controversial belief that you have, or that you hold very strongly, which most people would disagree with?
A lot. But we can talk about parenting again.
Sure.
So, for example, I believe, for me, I raised my kids unemployable, and I intentionally did that. And most people I talk to think that we should let our kids do whatever they want and be whoever they want. But I actually think being unemployable is absolutely wonderful because it empowers you to take ownership of whatever it is you decide to do, instead of hoping that somebody else will save us and pay us salary. And I'm not necessarily saying that everybody should be an entrepreneur, but by being an unemployable artist is also great.
Yeah, particularly in the next couple of decades.
Exactly.
I think being unemployable may be a very useful life skill as the world changes.
Yeah. And if you have a clarity that I'm unemployable, you suddenly liberate yourself from a lot of noise out there that schools
all these expectations, right?
Yeah.
Happiness equals reality minus expectations. You remove all those expectations from your life, and suddenly you're liberated to achieve a lot more, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you could travel back and speak to your 18-year-old self, and you can only give one piece of advice, what is it?
Believe in yourself.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you struggled with belief?
Absolutely. I really struggled. And that's what I'm trying to avoid with my kids. That's why I give them a lot of reinforcement, and I never criticize them. I have a rule.
Interesting.
Or my husband. He's never criticized either. Because I think it's just so important. You never help anyone by criticism, but you help people a lot by helping them believe in whoever they are.
That is so interesting. And when you say criticism, are you talking about feedback as well? Or like, can you give constructive feedback without it being critical?
Exactly. Of course. And you actually owe it to anybody you care about. Absolutely. Criticism is very different. Criticism is saying you did something wrong. You are wrong. All of these negative things that make the other person feel something's wrong with them, or they're not worthy of your respect or your love or your appreciation, because that's how we read the science. And I think every time we criticize someone, we actually miss an incredible opportunity to give them a boost. Yeah. Because every failure is an opportunity. But also, for example, if we're talking about like romantic relationships, right? And my husband makes a mistake. What's the point of me trying to criticize him if I already know that he feels horrible about himself? So instead, it's my opportunity to show him as much love as I possibly can, right? Because in a way, it's a constant test of our relationship. And what happens is that if something happens and he fails in some silly thing, I go all in making sure that he feels as good about himself as possible, and then he processes it and he feels, oh my God, I have such an amazing wife, right? And this love comes back to me 10x, and this feeds the relationship with a lot of energy. But it's the same thing with kids, it's the same thing with anybody, friends, right? The relationship can strengthen through someone's failure and the other person's going all in, boosting their confidence.
Nice. But what's a personal investment you made or a lifestyle investment you made that you think was really worthwhile?
One thing that was life-changing for me and came at the right moment was this understanding of how our well-being depends so much on our brain chemistry more than anything else. And once I've organized my whole lifestyle about my brain chemicals, and I exercise at the time which makes sense for my brain chemistry, and I eat things that are for my brain chemistry. So it's all optimized not only for health or longevity, but optimizing things for brain chemistry, because we feel feelings biochemically. So instead of going through overcomplicated analysis of our childhood trauma, we can simply do things that give us a serotonin boost in our brain. And it's a much more efficient way for us to feel happy and satisfied in life. Creating that system optimized for brain chemistry is the thing that made the most difference for me.
If someone else out there wants to do that and start taking their first step towards optimizing their life around their brain chemistry, What's the first step they need to do? Is there a scan that they need to do, or this?
No, absolutely. That's the best thing about it. Actually, the whole why is my favorite hack is because it only requires a bit of understanding of things that are not that difficult, which is brain chemistry. First, we just need to get educated on how the main elements in our brain work. It's not that difficult. If you just search for dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and cortisol, and you get the basic of how these things interact with each other and how to balance them, that's 90% of the success. And then, of course, it's always about taking action. But the beauty is that taking action is actually very, very simple. And the third thing to understand is that all these chemicals are designed to flow during the day in a certain way. So they're waves. And if we work against them, we create unnecessary friction and we waste a lot of energy. But if we just understand how they work and we structure our day around those waves, then everything is easier and we have more energy. Talking about mastering energy as the secret for your work-life balance or work-family balance, right? Maximizing or using those waves for our own advantage is super easy. We just need to know and then do it. So once you just start thinking the way your brain thinks in terms of your energy flow, things become much easier. I found that it's one of the most important secrets for how to have our next startup extremely successful without a burnout.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. Well, I need to master this brain chemistry.
Everyone needs. But for me, it changed my life. Honestly, it's the easiest thing to do.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you very much for spending time with us. It was really interesting to have another conversation. I finally got the parenting secrets that I wanted. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. Always a pleasure.